State Representative Cedric Glover introduced a bill yesterday to codify parity in funding with all the state, I'm going to say, charity hospitals, safety net hospitals. Cedric, how are you this morning? Thank you for taking time for us.
Doing well, guys. How y'all doing?
Well, here's how this is going to work.
I'm going crazy.
Just settle down there. Erin is freaking out because she watched a lot of video from the committee, from the Appropriations Committee yesterday, and she listened to the DHH Undersecretary Reynolds.
And I want to punch him.
Talking about how New Orleans gets more money because their people are sicker.
Yeah.
And then the Mark Abraham guy from Lake Charles who says, sorry, kids, I'm not giving up my piece of the pie. So I'm going to let you guys talk for a couple of seconds. And basically, this is going to be difficult for you because you are going to have to intersperse facts with talking Erin off the ledge.
I'm on the ledge, Cedric.
Are you up for that this morning?
Well, I think Erin should stay right on the ledge where she is right now. I think you guys are starting to see what I have been saying at least for the last 3 years, and this is probably one of the primary reasons as why I chose to come back and try and become part of the legislature again, because these are realities that have been a part of the history of the state of Louisiana for decades, and I'm just one of those folks who's committed now to trying to bring some clarity, some transparency, and hopefully some balance to how these things have worked for decades.
They
claim they brought home the bacon, but they're actually, putting us in a position where we're getting the short end of the stick year after year and situation after situation.
Representative Tony Bacala, I hope I'm saying the name right, from Pineville, said in testimony in your committee meeting yesterday that the New Orleans Charity Hospital, Safety Net Hospital, gets, what is it, $153?
153% of cost.
153% of cost. The Shreveport Hospital gets 79% of cost. Are those numbers right?
Well, that is certainly one set of numbers out there that indicates and confirms in similar fashion to what's come from the Shreveport Hospital, which indicates a 32 cents to $1. But yes, that's part of what this legislation seeks to try and determine, is that it tasks the Department of Health with auditing the actual cost of the Shreveport and Monroe operations compared to the New Orleans Medical School Hospital operations, and determining through confirmation by the legislative auditor whether or not those numbers are accurate. If they are, in fact, in line with what Representative Bacala has indicated and what has come from University Health, or whatever the actual number is, it then tasks the department, the state, the administration with balancing those numbers out and giving to Shreveport and Monroe its fair share of what it's due for doing the job that it's performing right now at an exceptional level.
Now you get Jeff Reynolds up there, the DHH Undersecretary, and he said, and please straighten me out if I'm wrong, he said the reason New Orleans gets so much more is because the patients they treat are sicker.
Again, Erin, I'm not going to talk you off this list. I'm glad you're there now. I've been there a while, but just level down and let's buckle in and let's be committed to doing what's necessary in order to try and balance this out, bring to this process the transparency that it deserves, and then figure out if we have the gumption to try and figure out how we balance this out so that Shreveport and Monroe can get its fair share to do the job that it has to do the same way the rest of the state does.
Does his argument have any merit that they're sicker? Is there any merit to that at all? Can you kind of explain it to me that maybe would make sense?
That's not a task I'm willing to take on.
When the Undersecretary of the State Department of Health and Human Services makes a statement like he made yesterday, that is nothing short of just it's just insane.
It's absurd.
Let's pass the legislation.
It's silly
talk. Go through the process, and if that is a relevant factor, then let that be discovered in the audit process that will go forward.
But doesn't that tell you, when somebody that high up in DHH says that is just so silly to me? Doesn't that tell you that for lack of a better term, the deep state, the fix is in for New Orleans?
Well, it tells me that this is always an uphill battle. But again, and these are hard tasks that if we expect to be effective representatives of the folks who have trusted us to come here to Baton Rouge and be their voice, then that is the type of rhetoric. Those are the types of arguments. Those are the types of challenges that we have the responsibility to take on, to not back away from, and be determined that we attempt as best we can and try and break through. And on yesterday, we made a little progress in that regard.
So let's get down to the nuts and bolts.
Headed to the House floor, no chance, right?
Made out of committee by one vote, and now it's on the floor. When is the vote?
And who do I need to scream at?
If there's ever a definition of a man working the room, it's got to be you.
Well, absolutely. We started by thanking all of those folks yesterday, starting with Representative Bacala and the others who stepped up and spoke truth and helped us move this legislation out. And it was a bipartisan, biracial, and across geographic effort to cobble together those 9 votes, and I'm very thankful for them. We also listened very intently to folks like Representative Abraham, who is speaking on behalf of his hospital there. But now what he doesn't understand, and what we're going to be working with him and others to try and make sure that we don't end up endangering with regard to this legislation, is that we're talking about the safety net hospitals right now that are contracted to work with the state's 2 public medical schools to provide the medical and clinical training to train new healthcare professionals. So those are the 2 apple-to-apple scenarios when it comes to cost and overhead and other things that this legislation specifically involves. And so we're going to make sure that we have to adjust, amend, that we don't end up doing anything that affects the Lake Charles and the Lafayettes and the Alexandrias and those others who don't have the kind of direct affiliation with the medical schools the way the 2 hospitals in Shreveport and New Orleans.
Cedric, when men like Representative Abraham from Lake Charles stand up and say, and we have the soundbite, well, we can't give more to Shreveport because that means we down here would get less, which is true. How do you overcome that?
Well, that's the task and the challenge that we have, and to somehow make sure that this is a situation where the balancing of this situation comes between those entities that have the most in common with regard to the responsibilities that we're tasking them with. And in this case, that is the 2 hospitals here in Shreveport and Monroe that are attached to the Shreveport Medical Schools, and the hospital in New Orleans that's attached to the New Orleans Medical School. That's the apple to apple.
Our last 30 seconds. Do you realistically have a chance of passing this on the House floor?
Well, now, here's what I will tell you. In 1965, House Bill 47, that was at that time authored by State Representative J. Bennett Johnson, passed out of committee by a 6-5 vote. That's the bill that created the Shreveport Medical School in the first place. So tight votes in committee are not anything new, but if you expect us to accomplish something great, you've got to be willing to dare to take on the task. That's what we're doing right now. If we don't break through this year, we'll be back next week.